The real meaning of winning a debate. Most people think winning a debate means shouting louder, humiliating the opponent, or making the audience laugh at them. But in reality, debate is not about volume, ego, or aggression. A real debate is about logic, clarity, and control of ideas. The person who structures their thoughts better, exposes weak reasoning, and keeps the conversation focused on facts is the one who truly wins. Think about it this way. A debate is like a mental chess match. Every statement you make is a move. Every claim your opponent makes is another move. If you react emotionally, you lose control of the game. But if you stay calm and respond with structured reasoning, you slowly push your opponent into a corner where their arguments collapse on their own. Another important thing to understand is that debates are not only about convincing the person you're arguing with. Most of the time, debates are about convincing the audience. The audience observes who is rational, who is emotional, who provides evidence, and who just throws opinions. The moment the audience trusts your reasoning more than your opponent's, you are already winning. In this video, you will learn the exact principles that make someone almost unbeatable in debates. These are not tricks or cheap tactics. These are powerful thinking strategies used by philosophers, scientists, and professional debaters. If you understand and apply these principles step by step, you will notice something interesting. Debates will start becoming predictable for you, and controlling them will become much easier. Control the frame of the debate. One of the biggest secrets of winning debates is something most beginners never notice. It is called controlling the frame of the debate. The frame simply means the way the discussion is defined. Whoever defines the rules, the topic boundaries, and the meaning of the question usually gains a massive advantage. Imagine two people debating whether a certain belief is true or false. If one person keeps shifting the topic, adding emotional stories, or introducing unrelated claims, the discussion becomes messy. But the person who keeps bringing the conversation back to the original question is controlling the frame. When the frame stays clear, weak arguments become very easy to expose. For example, suppose someone makes a big claim but cannot provide evidence. Instead of attacking them emotionally, you simply ask them to support their claim with proof. By doing this, you keep the frame focused on evidence and reasoning rather than feelings or assumptions. The moment the debate becomes evidence-based, irrational arguments begin to fall apart naturally. Great debaters always do this. They quietly guide the conversation back to logic, definitions, and proof whenever the opponent tries to escape. They don't get distracted by side arguments or emotional bait. By controlling the structure of the discussion, they make sure the debate stays on a battlefield where reason and evidence matter most. When you master the skill of controlling the frame, debates stop feeling chaotic. Instead, they start feeling structured and predictable. And when the structure is in your control, you are already several steps ahead of your opponent. Understand the burden of proof. One of the most powerful principles in any debate is something called the burden of proof. This rule is simple but extremely important. The person making the claim must provide the evidence. If someone says something is true, it is their responsibility to prove it. It is not your job to disprove every claim they make. Many inexperienced debaters make a big mistake here. When their opponent makes a bold claim, they immediately start trying to prove it wrong. This puts them in a defensive position. But strong debaters do the opposite. They calmly ask the other person to explain why their claim should be accepted as true in the first place. For example, if someone claims something extraordinary, the logical response is simple. Ask for evidence, reasoning, or reliable sources. If they cannot provide any solid support for their claim, the argument already becomes weak. You don't even need to attack it aggressively. The absence of proof itself exposes the weakness. This principle is powerful because it keeps debates grounded in logic rather than speculation. Instead of getting lost in endless arguments, you focus on one simple question: what evidence supports this claim? If the evidence is strong, the claim stands. If the evidence is weak or missing, the claim collapses naturally. Great debaters constantly use the burden of proof to maintain intellectual honesty in discussions. They make sure that every claim in the debate is backed by reasoning and evidence. This simple rule alone can eliminate many weak arguments before they even develop. Learn to spot logical fallacies. One of the fastest ways to dominate a debate is by learning to recognize logical fallacies. A logical fallacy is simply a mistake in reasoning. Sometimes people make these mistakes unknowingly, and sometimes they use them deliberately to make weak arguments sound convincing. If you can identify these errors, you can expose the weakness of an argument very quickly. For example, one common fallacy is the ad hominem attack. This happens when someone attacks the person instead of addressing the argument. Instead of discussing the idea, they might say something like, "You're ignorant," or, "You don't understand anything." But insults are not evidence. A calm debater simply points out that personal attacks do not answer the argument. Another very common fallacy is the straw man fallacy. This happens when someone misrepresents your argument to make it easier to attack. Instead of responding to what you actually said, they twist your words into something weaker and then argue against that version. A strong debater simply clarifies their original point and exposes the misrepresentation. There are many other fallacies as well, such as false dilemma, appeal to emotion, and circular reasoning. Once you become familiar with these patterns, you will start noticing them everywhere. Many arguments that sound powerful on the surface actually collapse when you examine their logical structure carefully. The more you train your mind to detect logical errors, the easier debates become. Instead of reacting emotionally, you calmly analyze the reasoning behind every claim. When flawed reasoning is exposed clearly, the strength of your argument becomes much more visible to everyone listening. Stay calm and control your emotions. One of the most underrated skills in debate is emotional control. Many debates are lost not because someone has weaker arguments, but because they lose their composure. When emotions take over, people start interrupting, raising their voice, and making careless statements. The moment this happens, the quality of their reasoning drops significantly. A calm debater has a huge advantage. When you remain composed, you think clearly, structure your responses better, and avoid unnecessary mistakes. Meanwhile, if your opponent becomes emotional, they often reveal weaknesses in their arguments. By staying calm, you allow their frustration to work against them. Another benefit of emotional control is credibility. People naturally trust individuals who appear rational and composed. If you present your ideas with patience and clarity, the audience begins to see you as the more reliable thinker in the discussion. Even strong arguments can lose impact if they are delivered with anger or arrogance. Think of debates as a mental discipline rather than a fight. Your goal is not to defeat someone personally but to analyze ideas logically. When you train yourself to remain calm under pressure, you maintain control of the discussion and make your reasoning much more persuasive. Ask smart questions instead of making long speeches. One powerful technique used by skilled debaters is asking precise and intelligent questions. Many beginners think debates are about giving long speeches and overwhelming the opponent with information. But in reality, well-placed questions can be far more powerful than long explanations. When you ask the right question, you force the other person to clarify their reasoning. Sometimes people make claims that sound strong at first, but when you ask them to explain the details, the weaknesses start to appear. A simple question like, "How did you reach that conclusion?" can reveal gaps in logic very quickly. Questions also help you guide the direction of the debate. Instead of reacting to everything your opponent says, you lead the conversation step by step. Each question moves the discussion toward facts, definitions, or evidence. This method prevents the debate from turning into a chaotic exchange of opinions. Great debaters often use questions as a strategic tool. Rather than attacking aggressively, they calmly explore the reasoning behind each claim. When someone cannot answer basic logical questions about their own argument, the audience can clearly see where the weakness lies. Break arguments into simple pieces. Many arguments sound powerful only because they are presented in a complicated way. When someone speaks quickly or uses complex language, it can create the illusion that their reasoning is strong. But skilled debaters know that every argument can be broken down into smaller, simpler parts. The first step is identifying the main claim your opponent is making. Once the claim is clear, you then look at the reasons they give to support it. Most arguments follow a simple structure: a claim, supporting reasons, and sometimes evidence. By separating these parts, you can examine each piece carefully instead of reacting to the whole argument at once. When you break an argument into pieces, weaknesses become much easier to identify. Sometimes the claim may be bold but the evidence is weak. Other times the reasoning connecting the evidence to the claim may be flawed. By analyzing each step logically, you can point out exactly where the argument stops making sense. This method also helps you explain your responses clearly. Instead of giving a long emotional reply, you calmly address each part of the argument step by step. This structured approach makes your thinking appear organized and logical, which greatly strengthens your position in any debate. Use evidence, not just opinions. One of the biggest differences between weak debaters and strong debaters is how they support their claims. Weak debaters rely mostly on opinions, personal beliefs, or assumptions. Strong debaters rely on evidence, data, and verifiable information. Evidence makes an argument far more convincing and difficult to challenge. Evidence can come from many sources. It might include scientific studies, historical facts, statistics, expert analysis, or well-documented research. When you support your argument with reliable evidence, you are not just sharing an opinion. You are presenting information that can be checked and verified. Another advantage of evidence-based arguments is credibility. When people hear facts supported by data or research, they are more likely to trust the argument. On the other hand, arguments based only on personal beliefs can easily be dismissed as subjective. Evidence adds weight and seriousness to what you are saying. Good debaters make it a habit to build their arguments on strong foundations. Before making a claim, they ask themselves whether they can support it with reliable information. When your reasoning is backed by evidence, your argument becomes much harder for your opponent to weaken or dismiss. Listen carefully and respond precisely. A mistake many people make in debates is that they focus only on what they want to say next. Instead of carefully listening to the opponent, they prepare their reply while the other person is still speaking. This habit causes people to miss important details, misunderstand arguments, and respond inaccurately. Strong debaters do the opposite. They listen very carefully to every statement their opponent makes. By doing this, they understand the exact claim, the reasoning behind it, and the assumptions hidden inside the argument. Once you fully understand what the other person is saying, it becomes much easier to respond effectively. Careful listening also helps you avoid attacking something your opponent never actually said. If you respond precisely to the real argument, your response appears fair and logical. The audience can clearly see that you are engaging with the discussion honestly rather than distorting the other person's position. Another advantage of listening carefully is that it helps you find contradictions. Sometimes people unknowingly contradict their earlier statements during a debate. When you notice these inconsistencies and calmly point them out, it weakens their argument significantly while strengthening your credibility in the discussion. Master the art of clear thinking. At the end of the day, winning debates is not about memorizing clever lines or humiliating your opponent. The real secret lies in clear thinking and disciplined reasoning. When you train your mind to analyze claims carefully, ask logical questions, and rely on evidence, debates start becoming much easier to handle. Throughout this video, we explored several important principles. We learned how controlling the frame of a debate keeps discussions focused, how the burden of proof forces claims to be supported with evidence, and how identifying logical fallacies helps expose weak reasoning. These tools transform debates from emotional arguments into structured intellectual discussions. We also discussed the importance of emotional control, asking smart questions, breaking complex arguments into simple parts, and listening carefully before responding. When you combine all these skills together, something powerful happens. You no longer react randomly in debates. Instead, you start guiding the discussion logically step by step. If you practice these principles consistently, you will notice a major shift in how you approach arguments and discussions. Debates will stop feeling like chaotic battles and start feeling like structured problem-solving conversations. And the person who thinks more clearly and argues more logically will almost always have the advantage.